afternoon, class, and welcome back to our English language classroom. And as usual, I'm your teacher, Miss Crawford, and here with me is Shania King. So I'm going to walk you through the first half of the lesson, and Miss Shania King is going to continue. So, last week we would have looked at the story, The Boy Who Loves Ice Cream by Olive Sr. So, today we're going to look at characterization through the antagonist. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to define the term antagonist and characterization, identify Ram Gohal as the antagonist in The Boy Who Loves Ice Cream, and analyze how the author characterized Ram Gohal through his actions and words. Now, what is an antagonist? An antagonist is the character or force that opposes the protagonist and creates conflict in the story. Anybody remember what the protagonist is? The hero who drives the plot. Alright, so the antagonist is the opposite to the protagonist. So the antagonist is like the villain, we would say, the person that spices up the story and make it more interesting. Now, characterization. Characterization is the way an author develops or reveals a character's personality through actions, words, thought, and appearance. So it's the way that we can tell a character, whether it's through something that they say, the way that they act, the way that they appear to us. Alright, we can tell if they're good or they're bad. Now let's meet the characters. We have the protagonist and the antagonist. In the story, we have Bostic, which is the young boy whose one dream was to taste the ice cream at the village fair. He presents childhood innocence and longing. Now in the story, all Bostic wanted was the ice cream. That's all he was interested in. The antagonist, Ram Gohal, who is Bostic's father, he was jealous, pride, he had rigid values, and he stand directly in the way of Bostic's simple dream. Alright, he paid attention to everything else except the one thing that his son desired. Now let's look at 4 key antagonist traits. Create conflict. So he refuses to let Bostic enjoy the fair and keeping him from the ice cream vendor. So this is, like I said, the only thing that he wanted, his father kept him from. He was driven by jealousy and pride. His obsession with Doris reveals envy and blinds him from his son's feeling. So he was so caught up with what was going on with Doris that he didn't even realize that he was hurting his son's feelings. Does not see himself as the villain. So he believes that his authority is justified. You know, have you ever heard someone say, I am right, you're wrong, I'm big, you're small, and there's nothing you can do about it? I have to. So, like Ram Gohal, he believes that his actions are justified. Represents societal forces. So he embodies poverty. So he's like, you know, there's some people just comfortable the way they are, they don't want changes, they're not open to it. Well, that's Ram Gohal. Now, I would like to hand you over to Miss Shania King, who's going to continue today's lesson.
Okay, so before we get into our activity, there is a question that I want you to think about, and then we will take a look at it, okay? That question is, what does Ram Gohal's behavior tells us about his character? What does Ram Gohal's behavior tells us about his character? Now, I want you to think about his action. I want you to think about the setting of this story. I also want you to think about the title of this story. Now I'm going to give you a few seconds and then I'm going to come back, okay? All know that Ramgalal and Boy Stick went to where is it set in? At the fair. Yes, good. So they went to this fair, and Boy Stick main goal was to get this ice cream. Now, when I say think about his actions, I want you to use evidence from the story, right? What about Ramgalal's action? What does his action tells you about the character, right? All right, so his fixation on Doris would have overshadowed his duty as a father, right? So let me write that. All right, so that was one of his first action. Now, can anyone tell me what does this action leads into? Yes, because of this, he would have neglected Boy Stick, and Boy Stick was unable to get this ice cream, right? All right, so now I'm going to put a question up on the board, and I'm going to have you guys sit with it. You're going to use evidence from the story to answer this question, right? So here's the question that we will be discussing in your books this afternoon, right? Is Ramgalal purely a villain, or does poverty and his social circumstances make him a victim too? Is Ramgalal purely a villain, or does poverty and his social circumstances make him a victim too? Now, remember, as I would have just said, I want you guys to use evidence from the text, all right? So I am going to give you a few minutes, and then we will discuss what you would have come up with, okay? So, do you think Ramgalal was a victim, or is he a villain? Victim, villain. All right, let me hear from you. Okay, you think he's both? That's good. All right, so what did Ramgalal do that was actually unfair in this story? Right, he would have made boys work very hard, or rather, he made Boy Stick work very hard with the promise of getting ice cream, and he ended up not getting the ice cream, right? All right, now what do we learn about Ramgalal's life and his circumstances? He was poor. What else? All right, so we do know that he was poor, and poverty would affect his actions, right? Okay, so do you think poverty is an excuse for his actions? All right, so poverty is not an excuse for Ramgalal's actions, right? Now, even though that it would have influenced, the way that he lived his life, or his actions towards not only his son, but the remainder of his family, poverty is not an excuse for his actions. So these are some of the things that we would have learned today. Characterization reveals who a character is through his actions, through his words, and through his relationships, right? Antagonist creates conflict but may not be purely evil. Now, Ramgulal is a very complex character, so we will have a next class looking more in depth into him. Ramgulal's jealousy and pride directly opposes Boystick's desire, making him the key antagonist. So we would have learned what Ramgulal's action was that caused him to become the antagonist. And lastly, Olive Sr. uses Ramgulal to critique how poverty and pride destroys innocence. All right? Do I have any questions? No? Okay. I'll see you in the next class, guys.